Long before a shepherd's sling sent a stone singing into the Valley of Elah, there stood in the shadows of Philistine law a family feared even by warriors. They were called the sons of the giant, men of monstrous measure whose names stirred trembling in the hearts of Israel. Goliath of Gath, Ishbi-Benob, Saph, Lahmi, and an unnamed brother born with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. Their father, Rapha, known among his people as a remnant of the ancient Rephaim, towered like a living monument to a forgotten age of giants. In the dark corners of Philistine hearths, old men would lower their voices, telling of Rapha's sons, not just warriors, but living relics of the old terror that had once stalked Canaan's hills. Among them, Goliath stood tallest, his iron-scaled armor weighing more than most men, his spear like a weaver's beam crowned with an iron head heavier than a soldier's hopes. But Goliath was more than a giant of bone and sinew. He was the pride of Gath, proof that the Philistines still carried the blood of old conquest. His brothers, though lesser in name, were no less bred for war. Ishbi-Benob bore a new sword forged for slaughter. Saph was called the basin for he claimed to drink blood of the fallen. Lahmi, Goliath's brother, carried a spear so long it seemed to touch the clouds. And the youngest, unnamed yet marked by 12 fingers and 12 toes, walked with a gait of arrogance, as if destiny itself bowed before him. In the valleys near Gath, they trained from boyhood, swinging stone weights and iron clubs, learning to break shields and spirits alike. The Philistine lords saw in them not merely sons of Rapha but weapons that could humble the armies of Israel. Songs of their might spread across the 5 cities of the Philistines: Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron, and Gath itself, where the brothers' laughter echoed in the courts of kings. Yet while they grew, Israel's strength withered. Saul, the chosen king, grew haunted and hollow, tormented by a spirit darker than Philistine blades. In hidden pastures, a shepherd boy named David tended sheep, his harp soothing the madness of Saul by day and his prayers rising like smoke by night. The brothers heard rumors of this boy, but what was a harpist to men who had crushed skulls and shattered gates? In Goliath's dreams, he saw himself trampling the armies of Israel, Saul's crown rolling in the dust beneath his iron-sandaled feet. And so the day came when armies gathered in the Valley of Elah, Israel encamped on one hill, the Philistines on another, and the valley, silent and waiting, between. Morning after morning, Goliath stepped forward, bronze gleaming under the sun, his shadow falling across the valley like a curse. His voice rolled out like thunder, "Choose you a man to fight me. If he kills me, we will serve you. But if I prevail, you shall serve us." 40 days passed, and no man in Israel dared step forward. Saul himself, once tall among his people, shrank into his tent, crown heavy with dread. From Gath, the brothers watched, proud and certain, for none could match Goliath. In their hearts, victory seemed already carved in stone. But destiny rarely bows to the mighty. Sometimes it slips into the camp in the form of a shepherd boy carrying bread and cheese. David came, saw, and something fierce sparked behind his youthful eyes. Not pride, but faith so raw and bright it blinded even fear. He spoke words that cut deeper than swords. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" His brothers in Israel mocked him, but David turned from scorn, for his gaze was set not on Goliath's height but on God's promise. And so the boy stood alone in the valley, sling in hand, stones cool from the brook, while Goliath cursed by his gods, his laughter echoing off stone walls. The giant moved forward, shield-bearer before him. David ran to meet him, words of faith burning his tongue. "The battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." A single stone flew, the air held its breath, and the world shifted on its axis as the champion of Gath fell forward, face in the dust. Israel roared, Philistines fled, and the brothers of Goliath watched the fall of the unthinkable, the pillar of their pride struck down by a shepherd's faith. But giants do not vanish so easily, and the story of Rapha's house did not end in that valley. It only bent into darker paths yet to come. For while one brother lay slain, for shadows remained, hearts burning not with fear, but with vengeance sworn by blood and bone. In Gath's quiet nights, the hammer rang on anvils, swords were sharpened, and vows whispered. The name of David would be carved from memory by giant hands yet unbroken. And so began a new chapter, a dance of vengeance and faith, where past sins cast long shadows over futures yet unwritten. The brothers of Goliath waited, biding their time, for even giants know that patience can be sharper than steel. But David, too, would rise, not just as shepherd or champion, but as king chosen by God, whose faith proved stronger than fear, whose courage woke a sleeping nation. And though battles lay ahead, and giants yet stood, the sling had spoken a truth no sword could silence. That faith, even in small hands, topples the proudest foe. The brothers of the fallen giant would come. Blood would be spilled, legends born, and hearts tested by fire. And in the heart of it all, a song would rise, not of giants and iron, but of a God whose strength is made perfect in weakness. For though giants fall, grace stands, and though vengeance burns, faith endures. And so the tale of Goliath and his brothers moves beyond a single stone, into fields yet to taste the clash of iron and the cry of faith. The past had been written in blood, but the future still waited, trembling at the edge of destiny's blade. And as night fell on the Valley of Elah, the story was far from over. It had only just begun. Night settled over Gath like a heavy shroud, and in the halls of the giants, the air itself seemed to grieve Goliath's fall. The city that once roared with pride now murmured in disbelief. Even the bravest warriors walked with lowered eyes, for a truth they had never dreamed now lay bare before them. Yet inside the darkened chamber of Rapha's house, grief twisted into something sharper than sorrow, a cold and furious vow. Ishbi-Benob, first among the brothers, stood beside Goliath's empty armor, tracing a scar on his palm that burned with memory and rage. "A boy," he spat, voice rough with contempt. "A boy with no sword, no shield." And Goliath fell. Beside him, Saph tightened thick fists until knuckles turned white. Lahmi lowered his gaze, jaw clenched, as the youngest brother, the six-fingered one, whispered, "Blood calls for blood." And so in that chamber, under oil lamps flickering against stone, they swore an oath by the gods of the Philistines. David would fall, and with him every hope Israel dared to raise. Yet as the giants plotted, across valleys and hills, David's life unfolded into paths none could foresee. Victory brought not rest, but exile and danger. For though Saul had crowned him champion, the king's heart darkened with jealousy. The shepherd who slew Goliath now became a fugitive hunted by the very throne he had saved. In caves and wilderness, David hid, harp silent, heart heavy, yet his faith burned quietly, an ember that even fear could not quench. Ishbi-Benob heard of David's flight and saw weakness. To the giant, a kingless man was as good as dead. So he forged a new spear, its bronze head glittering with promise of revenge, and set his gaze on finding the fugitive. But David's exile was no lonely wandering. Mighty men gathered around him, broken men, outcasts, and debtors, drawn by a faith that refused to die. Among them was Abishai, fierce and loyal, whose watchful eye burned with devotion to his anointed king. In the hills near Nob, Ishbi-Benob finally found David, wearied from battle, his strength nearly spent. The giant stepped forward, bronze spear gleaming like dawn. For a moment, even the bravest among David's men faltered. Ishbi-Benob's voice cut the air, "You took my brother, now I take your life." David, breath shallow, felt the weight of death near, yet Abishai surged forward, blade flashing like hope reborn. They clashed, giant strength against fierce devotion. Dust swirled, hearts thundered, until Abishai's sword found flesh, and Ishbi-Benob fell, the earth itself groaning under his weight. Word of the fall reached Gath, and sorrow turned colder still. Yet Saph, called the Basin, stepped forward, dark eyes lit with hunger for battle. One brother falls, another rises, he swore, for giants know that vengeance is not swift, but relentless. In another clash, Saph faced David's men. The battle raged like fire across a threshing floor near Gob. Warriors stumbled and rose again. Blades rang against shields, until Sibbecai the Hushathite, steady and silent, met Saph's charge. In that moment, past and future collided. For though the giant roared, Sibbecai's resolve stood firm, and his sword struck true. Saph fell, his blood darkening the dust, and another pillar of Rapha's house lay broken. In Gath, the youngest brother, marked by 12 fingers and 12 toes, lifted his hands to the gods, vowing by every crooked digit that David's line would fall. His name is lost to history, but his presence burned bright, a mockery of creation itself, pride twisted into flesh. Yet before him, Lahmi, brother to Goliath, took his stand, for in his veins ran the same fierce blood that once taunted armies. Near Gob, Lahmi faced Elanan, son of Jori. The giant spear seemed to carve the very air, each swing a promise of death. Yet Elanan, eyes locked not on Lahmi's height but on heaven's strength, found the narrow space between pride and fall. With one stroke, Lahmi's life ended. The spear of Goliath's brother fell to dust, and silence swept across the field. 3 brothers had fallen, yet the youngest stood untouched, fury burning brighter for every loss. He marched into battle against Israel, 6 fingers gripping blade and shield, voice rising in curses so foul even Philistine captains recoiled. Yet destiny often waits in unexpected hands. It was Jonathan, son of Shemaiah, David's brother, who met him in combat. Blood ties to David met bloodline of giants. Faith faced pride, humility faced scorn. The clash shook the ground, yet Jonathan, steady in purpose, struck the blow that ended the last of Rapha's sons. For giants had risen to avenge a brother, yet each fell not to kings or crowns, but to men whose courage burned brighter than fear. Across Israel, songs rose, not of giant slayers, but of a God who lifts the humble and humbles the proud. David, weary yet unbroken, saw the shadows of Goliath's brothers fade, and knew that the true strength of a kingdom is never found in height or might alone. For giants fall, but faith stands, vengeance dies, but mercy endures. And though the names of Rapha's house would fade into footnotes and ruins, the story they shaped carved itself into hearts for generations. Beyond the clash of iron and the weight of stone, there beat a truth stronger than any spear, that even the fiercest foe bows before the hand of the living God. In Gath, the anvil grew cold, mothers wept for sons too tall for graves, and the old men spoke softly of a house that had dreamed of dominion, only to meet dust. Yet in Israel, the song grew deeper, not of David's arm, but of the Lord who had delivered him again and again from the hands of the mighty. And David, crowned by struggle, found his gaze turning beyond giants, beyond thrones, to the one whose promise had guided every stone he had cast. But even as peace settled like a hush over Israel, shadows stirred in the distance. For battles won do not end the story, and faith tested once will be tested again. Goliath and his brothers lay silent, yet the lessons they left echoed, that pride falls, faith stands, and vengeance cannot outlast grace. And so the story moved forward, past giants and fallen kings, toward promises yet unfulfilled and hope yet unseen. For the true king had not yet come, and the greatest giant to be slain was not of flesh, but of sin and death itself. And in that quiet space between battles, David lifted his eyes and sang, "For though giants fall, the steadfast love of the Lord endures forever." The shadows of Goliath and his fallen brothers stretched long over Israel, but time, like a river, carries even the tallest stones away. David, once the boy with a sling, now wore a crown heavy with victories, regrets, and memories of friends lost and enemies conquered. Yet for all the songs sung of giant slayers, age taught David that the fiercest foes wear no armor, speak no curses, and bear no spear. Late in life, the echoes of the past returned to test him, not in the form of towering warriors, but in battles of the spirit. The king, once content to trust God's strength, ordered a census of fighting men, as if numbers could now replace faith. Job, his commander, urged him to reconsider, but David's heart, wearied by years of blood and loss, leaned toward pride. When the count was complete, guilt pierced David sharper than any blade. He saw too late that trust had turned to numbers, and numbers had turned to sin. And from heaven, judgment came, a plague sweeping across the land David had fought so long to protect. 70,000 fell, mothers wept, and David, broken in spirit, fell before God, crying, "I have sinned. Let your hand fall on me and my house, not on your people." In that hour, David's greatness was not measured in conquests or slain giants, but in a heart that repented, humbled, and wept for those he led. An angel, sword drawn over Jerusalem, paused at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. Their mercy halted judgment, and grace quieted wrath. David bought the field, refusing to offer God what cost him nothing, and there built an altar. Sacrifice rose, the plague ceased, and peace returned. The place of fear became a place of worship, and in generations to come, Solomon would build the temple there, where giants once cast their shadows. Yet the story of Goliath and his brothers did not truly end in fields of battle or royal courts. It lived on in the hearts of those who heard it. Fathers told sons of the day faith toppled pride. Mothers whispered of a boy who faced death unshaken because his hope rested not on sword or shield. Children traced the names of Rapha's house on dusty roads, wondering how men so mighty could fall to shepherds and soldiers whose names were once unknown. And in that wonder lay the true legacy, not fear of giants, but faith in a God who chooses the small, the unlikely, the forgotten. David himself would see other storms, rebellion by his own son Absalom, betrayal by trusted friends, and tears shed over mistakes that could not be undone. Yet the heart that beat in the Valley of Elah still beat within the old king, a heart that knew even giants cannot stand against the Lord of hosts. On cold nights, perhaps David remembered Goliath's roar, the shock of silence as the stones struck true, and the sudden crash of iron and pride into the dust. And he knew the real miracle was never the stone's flight, but the faith that dared to let it fly. Across the sea, Gath's walls still stood, though quieter now. The house of Rapha lay silent, its name fading into ruin swallowed by grass and time. Giants, it seemed, could rule for a season, but faith would echo across generations. For the true power was never in height or strength, but in the unseen hand guiding small stones toward impossible targets. And so the tale grew larger than Goliath, Ishbi-Benob, Saph, Lahmi, and the six-fingered brother. It became a story of hearts that dared believe. Centuries later, prophets and psalmists would sing of the shepherd king whose trust turned valleys of fear into altars of praise. And beyond David, whispers of a greater king arose, a son of David who would fight not with sling or sword, but with sacrifice. In Bethlehem, where David once watched over sheep, another child would be born. Fragile in flesh, yet carrying the promise to slay the greatest giant of all, sin and death. This king would wear no iron helmet, carry no spear of bronze, yet his victory would pierce darkness deeper than Goliath's shout ever reached. And on a hill outside Jerusalem, the giant none could face, death itself, would be defeated by love nailed to wood. In that cross, the echoes of Elah were heard again, the proud fell and the humble stood, the impossible became truth, the small overcame the mighty. And in an empty tomb, the final stone was rolled away, and the last of giants was left defeated forever. Looking back, David's story with Goliath and his brothers was not merely about men of great height, but about a God whose faithfulness towers higher still. The giants taught Israel fear, David taught Israel faith. And faith proved stronger, even against iron and roars. So the Psalms David wrote still rise in dawn prayers and midnight fears. The Lord is my shepherd. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For in every valley, giants may stand, but so does the shepherd, unseen yet ever near. And though men remember the names of the fallen for a while, faith's story outlives stone and spear alike. The last brothers of Goliath died by swords held by faithful men whose strength lay not in muscle, but in trust. And though their names slipped into silence, the story of what God can do with faith as small as a shepherd's stone remains. To every heart facing giants unseen, fears, failures, shame, this story still whispers, trust and watch what God can do. For the lesson is not that giants cannot come, they do, and often, but that no giant, however tall, is beyond the reach of faith in the living God. And though we may tremble, the one who holds us never does. In the end, giants fall not because stones fly straight, but because grace stands stronger. David's sling, the sword of Abishai, the courage of Jonathan son of Shemaiah, all were instruments of a story written by unseen hands. And the God who toppled Goliath still topples the towering fears in every generation. So the song that rose after victory remains true today. The battle is the Lord's. Even the mightiest fall, kingdoms crumble, but faith endures, because its strength is not in the one who believes, but in the one believed in. And in the end, the true giant was never Goliath, but pride, and it is always defeated by humble trust in God. So the story closes where it began, a valley, a stone, and a God whose power shines brightest through willing hearts. And though giants fall silent in dust, faith's voice still speaks, strong, steady, and eternal. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories.